Sarah walked into the community center with quiet steps, her worn sneakers making barely a sound on the polished floor. At 42 years old, she looked like any ordinary working mother picking up groceries after a long day. Her graying hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her faded jeans showed the comfortable wear of someone who valued practicality over fashion. She carried a small gym bag that had seen better days, its fabric showing signs of years of use. The karate dojo occupied the largest room in the center, with mirrors covering one wall and traditional wooden floors that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Through the glass doors, she could see students in crisp white uniforms practicing their forms with precision and power. Their movements were sharp and confident, each kick and punch delivered with the authority that came from years of training. Sarah paused outside the door, her hand resting on the handle as she watched the class in session. The instructor, a stern-faced man in his 50s with a black belt tied around his waist, was correcting a student's stance with practiced efficiency. Around him, other black belts moved through the room like sharks in water, their presence commanding respect from the lower-ranked students. She had been thinking about this moment for weeks. Her daughter Emma had been begging her to try something new, something just for herself. "Mom, you work all the time," Emma had said over breakfast one morning. "When was the last time you did something fun?" Sarah had smiled and changed the subject, but the words stuck with her. When was the last time she had done something just because she wanted to? The decision to try karate had come suddenly. She was walking past the community center after grocery shopping when she saw the sign advertising beginner classes. Something about the idea appealed to her. Maybe it was the thought of learning something completely new, or maybe it was the promise of physical activity that didn't involve cleaning the house or chasing after her teenage children. Taking a deep breath, Sarah pushed open the door and stepped inside. The sound of bare feet on wooden floors and the sharp exhales that accompanied each strike filled the air. Several students glanced in her direction, their expressions ranging from curious to mildly dismissive. She could almost hear their thoughts. Another middle-aged mom trying to get in shape probably wouldn't last more than a few classes. The instructor, Master Chen, noticed her immediately. His dark eyes assessed her with the same intensity he used to evaluate his students' techniques. "Are you here for the beginner class?" he asked, his voice carrying a slight accent that spoke of years spent perfecting his English alongside his martial arts. "Yes," Sarah replied simply, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. "I called yesterday about joining." Master Chen nodded and gestured toward a small office area where registration forms were kept. As Sarah filled out the paperwork, she could hear the other students continuing their practice. The sound of controlled breathing and the sharp snap of fabric as uniforms moved through the air created a rhythm that was both intimidating and oddly soothing. When she finished the forms, Master Chen handed her a white uniform still in its plastic packaging. "You can change in the restroom," he said, pointing toward the back of the room. "We will wait for you to begin the introductory session." In the small restroom, Sarah changed into the uniform, tying the white belt around her waist with careful precision. The fabric felt strange against her skin, crisp and new in a way that made her acutely aware of her inexperience. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Gone was the tired mother in work clothes, replaced by someone who looked ready to learn something new. When she returned to the main room, the advanced students had gathered to watch the beginner session. This was apparently standard practice, Master Chen explained, as it helped new students see what they could achieve with dedication and training. Sarah nodded, though she felt increasingly self-conscious under the scrutiny of so many experienced martial artists. Among the observers were 3 black belts who stood together near the back wall. Marcus was the tallest, a man in his early 30s with the build of someone who spent significant time in the gym. His uniform was perfectly pressed and his black belt showed the wear patterns of years of serious training. Beside him stood Jennifer, a woman about Sarah's age but with the lean muscle definition of a competitive athlete. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her stance radiated confidence. The third member of their group was David, younger than the others but with an intensity that suggested he took his martial arts very seriously indeed. The 3 had been training together for years and were known in the dojo for their skill and their somewhat competitive nature. They often stayed after regular classes to spar with each other, pushing their techniques to higher levels through friendly but intense competition. They were respected by other students but also somewhat intimidating to newcomers. Another suburban mom, Marcus murmured to his companions, just loud enough for Sarah to hear. I give her 3 weeks before she quits. Jennifer smiled thinly. That's generous. I say 2 weeks. They always start strong and then realize this isn't like their yoga classes. David said nothing, but his smirk spoke volumes about his agreement with his training partners. Sarah heard their comments but gave no indication that their words affected her. She had heard similar dismissive remarks before in other contexts and other situations. Being underestimated was something she had grown accustomed to over the years. People saw a quiet, unassuming woman and made assumptions about her capabilities and her character. Master Chen began the introductory lesson with basic stances and movements. He demonstrated each position slowly, explaining the purpose behind every angle and the importance of proper form. Sarah followed along carefully, her movements deliberate and controlled. While other beginners in previous classes had struggled with balance or coordination, Sarah seemed to grasp the fundamentals with surprising ease. The instructor noticed her natural ability immediately. Her stance was solid, her balance excellent, and she absorbed instruction with the focus of someone truly committed to learning. When he adjusted her form, she made the corrections smoothly and maintained them throughout the rest of the exercise. As the lesson progressed, the watching black belts began to pay closer attention. While they had expected to see another clumsy beginner struggling with basic coordination, Sarah moved with a grace that suggested some underlying athleticism. Her breathing was controlled, her movements economical, and she never seemed to tire even as the session extended into more challenging exercises. She's not terrible, Jennifer admitted quietly to her companions. Beginner's luck, Marcus replied, though his tone carried less conviction than before. The introductory session ended with a brief meditation period, something Sarah seemed to embrace naturally. While other beginners fidgeted or checked their phones, she sat in perfect stillness, her breathing deep and regular. When Master Chen called the class to attention, Sarah's eyes opened immediately, alert and focused. As students began to disperse, the 3 black belts approached Sarah with smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. They introduced themselves and welcomed her to the dojo with words that sounded polite, but carried an undertone of challenge. Welcome to our dojo, Marcus said, extending his hand to Sarah with a practiced smile. I'm Marcus, and these are my training partners, Jennifer and David. We've been here for quite a while. Sarah shook his hand with a firm grip that surprised him. Thank you. I'm Sarah. I'm looking forward to learning. Jennifer stepped forward, her expression carefully neutral. Most people find karate more challenging than they expect. It's not just about learning a few moves for self-defense. It requires real commitment and discipline. I understand, Sarah replied simply. There was something in her tone that suggested she knew more about discipline than they might assume, but she offered no elaboration. David, who had been sizing her up silently, finally spoke. Master Chen is an excellent instructor, but he can be quite demanding. The training gets much more intense as you advance. Physical conditioning, sparring, breaking techniques. It's not for everyone. Sarah nodded politely. I appreciate the information. I'm sure I'll learn as I go along. The 3 black belts exchanged glances. They were used to newcomers being either intimidated by their warnings or overly eager to prove themselves. Sarah's calm acceptance of their comments was neither, and it left them slightly off balance. Over the following weeks, Sarah attended every beginner class without fail. She arrived early, changed quickly, and was always ready when instruction began. Her progress was steady and consistent, and Master Chen found himself spending less time correcting her form and more time introducing new techniques. While other beginners struggled with the coordination required for basic kata, Sarah moved through the forms with increasing confidence. Her kicks were becoming higher and more controlled, her punches more precise. When practicing with partners, she was careful and respectful, but demonstrated an understanding of timing and distance that usually took months to develop. The 3 black belts continued to observe her progress with growing curiosity. During their own training sessions, they often discussed the new student who seemed to be advancing faster than anyone expected. There's something different about her, Jennifer said one evening as they cooled down after a particularly intense sparring session. She moves like she has some kind of background in martial arts, but Master Chen said she's a complete beginner. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead with a towel. Maybe she did some self-defense classes or took karate as a kid. Sometimes people forget they have that foundation. David shook his head. I asked her directly last week. She said she'd never done any martial arts before. But watch how she positions herself when she's listening to instruction. Most beginners stand casually, but she's always in a slight ready stance. It's subtle, but it's there. Their speculation grew stronger when Sarah began attending the mixed-level classes that were held twice a week. These sessions included students from white belt to black belt, and the training was more intensive. Master Chen had invited Sarah to join after only 3 weeks, an unusually quick progression that raised eyebrows among the regular students. In the mixed classes, Sarah's abilities became more apparent. While she still wore her white belt and deferred to higher-ranked students, her movements had a quality that suggested deeper understanding. When demonstrated techniques were shown once, she could replicate them with remarkable accuracy. When practicing combinations, she flowed from one technique to the next with a smoothness that belied her supposed inexperience. The breaking point came during a particularly challenging class focused on self-defense applications. Master Chen was demonstrating how to escape from various grabs and holds, emphasizing the importance of using an attacker's momentum against them. The techniques required precise timing and an understanding of leverage that most students took months to grasp. When it came time for partner practice, Sarah was paired with a green belt student named Mike, a large man who worked in construction and had been training for about a year. Mike was known for being somewhat overzealous in his practice, often using more force than necessary with newer students. Don't worry, Mike said to Sarah as they prepared to practice the escape techniques. I'll go easy on you since you're still new. Master Chen demonstrated the first technique, escaping from a front grab where an attacker seizes both wrists. The key was to use circular motion and proper footwork to break free and create an opportunity for counterattack. When Mike grabbed Sarah's wrists for their practice, he used considerably more force than Master Chen had demonstrated. This was partly his usual overeagerness and partly a test to see how the new student would handle real pressure. Sarah remained calm as Mike's large hands closed around her wrists. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, in one fluid motion that was almost too fast to follow, she stepped forward and to the side while rotating her arms in a perfect circle. Mike found himself off balance and stumbling forward as Sarah slipped free with effortless ease. The movement was so smooth and natural that it took several seconds for the observers to process what they had seen. Sarah had not just escaped from the hold. She had done so with a level of technical precision that suggested years of practice. Nice, Mike said, genuinely impressed. Can you show me how you did that footwork? I've been struggling with that technique for weeks. Sarah hesitated for just a moment before demonstrating the movement slowly. As she broke down the technique, her explanation was clear and detailed, focusing on the mechanical principles that made the escape effective. Her understanding went far beyond what any beginner should possess. Marcus, Jennifer, and David had stopped their own practice to watch. The escape technique Sarah had demonstrated was one they had all struggled with when they first learned it. Most students required dozens of repetitions and constant correction to perform it correctly. Sarah had made it look effortless. That was very good, Master Chen said, approaching their practice area. His expression was thoughtful as he watched Sarah return to a ready position. Have you practiced this technique before? No, sir, Sarah replied. You demonstrated it very clearly. Master Chen nodded slowly, but his eyes remained on Sarah with new interest. In 30 years of teaching martial arts, he had learned to recognize natural talent and previous training. Sarah's movement had shown both, despite her claims of being a complete beginner. As the class continued, the 3 black belts found themselves watching Sarah more closely. Each new technique she learned seemed to come naturally to her. Her balance was perfect, her timing precise, and her understanding of the principles behind the movements was far more advanced than her white belt would suggest. During the final exercise of the class, students were asked to demonstrate their favorite technique in front of the group. When Sarah's turn came, she performed a simple front kick that she had learned in her second week. However, the execution was flawless. The chamber was perfect, the extension complete, and the recovery instant. More importantly, there was a power behind the technique that surprised everyone watching. As students bowed out at the end of class, Marcus approached Sarah with a new level of respect in his voice. "That was impressive work tonight. You seem to have a real aptitude for martial arts." "Thank you," Sarah replied, beginning to change out of her uniform. "I'm enjoying the classes very much." Jennifer joined the conversation, her earlier dismissiveness replaced by genuine curiosity. "You mentioned you've never done martial arts before, but you move with remarkable confidence. Do you have any athletic background?" Sarah paused in packing her gear, considering her answer carefully. "I've always believed in staying physically active," she said finally. "But no formal martial arts training." David stepped closer, his expression serious. "Sarah, I don't want to seem presumptuous, but there's something about your movement that suggests more experience than you're letting on. If you have previous training, there's no shame in mentioning it." For a long moment, Sarah looked at the three black belts who had initially dismissed her so casually. She could see genuine curiosity in their faces now, mixed with a growing respect that had been absent during her first day. The temptation to reveal more about her background was strong, but old habits of discretion kept her silent. "I appreciate your interest," she said finally, shouldering her gym bag, "but I'm exactly what I appear to be, a middle-aged mother who decided to try something new." As Sarah walked toward the exit, the three black belts remained behind, their minds racing with questions and theories. What they had witnessed that evening challenged everything they thought they knew about the quiet woman who had joined their dojo only a month earlier. The following Tuesday brought an unexpected challenge to the dojo. Master Chen announced that a group of visiting martial artists from a neighboring school would be joining their evening class for a cultural exchange session. These visitors practiced a different style of karate and were known for their aggressive training methods and competitive spirit. Sarah arrived at her usual time, unaware of the special session planned for that evening. As she changed into her uniform, she could hear unfamiliar voices from the main training floor, speaking loudly and with obvious confidence about their techniques and achievements. When she entered the dojo, she immediately noticed the change in atmosphere. The visiting students, all wearing black belts from their own school, had arranged themselves in a loose semicircle and were demonstrating advanced kata with sharp, powerful movements. Their instructor, a stocky man with graying temples and hands that showed the calluses of decades of training, watched approvingly as his students performed. Master Chen approached Sarah as she prepared for class. "Tonight we have visitors from the Dragon-style Karate Academy," he explained quietly. "They have requested to observe our training methods and perhaps participate in some friendly exchanges. It should be educational for everyone." Sarah nodded, taking her usual place among the other students. She noticed that Marcus, Jennifer, and David seemed more tense than usual, their movements carrying an edge of competitiveness that suggested they viewed this visit as more than just a cultural exchange. The guest instructor, Master Tanaka, was introduced to the class with formal ceremony. He was clearly a man accustomed to respect and deference, and his students arranged themselves behind him with military precision. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who expected immediate compliance. "In our school," Master Tanaka announced to the combined group, "we believe that martial arts must be tested under pressure to have any real value. Technique means nothing without the spirit to apply it effectively." The regular students shifted uncomfortably. Master Chen's teaching philosophy emphasized respect, discipline, and gradual development. The visiting school's approach seemed focused on proving superiority through direct confrontation. "Perhaps some of your advanced students would like to demonstrate their skills with my students," Master Tanaka suggested, his eyes scanning the room until they settled on Marcus, Jennifer, and David. "A friendly sparring session can teach us much about different approaches to training." Marcus stepped forward immediately, his competitive nature overriding any caution he might have felt. "We would be honored," he said, bowing respectfully to the visiting instructor. What followed was a series of controlled sparring matches that grew increasingly intense as each side attempted to prove the superiority of their training methods. The visiting students fought with a hard-edged aggression that pushed the boundaries of what could be considered friendly competition. Jennifer faced off against a woman about her own age but with notably more muscular development. The match began traditionally with formal bows and respectful distance, but quickly escalated into something approaching combat. Jennifer's usual precise techniques seemed insufficient against her opponent's relentless pressure, and she found herself being systematically overwhelmed. David fared somewhat better against a younger opponent, but the visiting student's conditioning and aggressive tactics eventually wore him down. By the end of his match, David was breathing heavily and had taken several hard hits that would leave bruises for days. Marcus, as the senior student among the three, faced the most skilled of the visiting students. The match was intense from the first exchange, with both fighters demonstrating advanced techniques and exceptional physical conditioning. However, Marcus's opponent had clearly trained for situations where martial arts became more than academic exercise, and his ability to maintain composure under pressure gave him a decisive advantage. As the visiting students celebrated their victories with barely contained smugness, the regular students felt a collective sense of deflation. Their school's reputation had been challenged, and their best fighters had been systematically defeated. Master Tanaka surveyed the results with obvious satisfaction. "Your students show good form," he said to Master Chen, "but form without fighting spirit is merely dance. Perhaps your teaching methods focus too much on philosophy and too little on practical application." The criticism stung, particularly because it came after such clear demonstrations of superiority. Master Chen maintained his composure, but Sarah could see the tension in his posture and the slight tightening around his eyes that suggested controlled anger. "Martial arts serve different purposes for different people," Master Chen replied diplomatically. "We teach discipline, respect, and self-improvement alongside practical skills. Self-improvement is worthless if you cannot defend yourself when the situation demands it," Master Tanaka countered. "In the real world, attackers do not wait for you to achieve perfect form." The exchange might have continued indefinitely if not for an unexpected interruption. One of the visiting students, a young man with an arrogant smile and muscles that suggested significant weight training, pointed toward the group of lower-ranked students. "What about her?" he asked, nodding toward Sarah. "She has been watching very intently. Perhaps she would like to test her skills as well?" The suggestion was clearly meant as a joke, a way to further emphasize the superiority of their school by defeating even the newest and least experienced student. Several of his companions laughed openly at the idea of facing someone wearing a white belt. Sarah felt the attention of both schools focus on her with sudden intensity. Marcus, Jennifer, and David looked horrified at the suggestion, clearly concerned that she would be hurt or humiliated by an encounter with these aggressive opponents. "That would hardly be fair," Master Chen said firmly. "Sarah has been training for only a few weeks. She is not prepared for this level of contact." Master Tanaka waved dismissively. "Of course not a real match. But perhaps a brief demonstration? My student could show her some basic applications while being very gentle. It might be educational for her to see how techniques work under mild pressure." The visiting student who had made the suggestion stepped forward with obvious confidence. His name was Kenji, and he was clearly one of the more skilled members of the visiting group. His movements as he approached the center of the training area were fluid and controlled, suggesting years of dedicated practice. "I will be very careful," Kenji said, bowing toward Sarah with exaggerated courtesy. Just a few simple techniques to show the difference between practicing in the air and applying them against a real opponent. Sarah looked around the room at the faces watching her. She could see concern from Master Chen, embarrassment from her three advanced classmates, and barely concealed amusement from the visiting students. The setup was clearly intended to provide entertainment at her expense. For a moment she considered declining the invitation. It would be easy enough to claim inexperience or concern about injury. No one would think less of a white belt for avoiding confrontation with a skilled black belt from an aggressive school. Instead, Sarah stepped forward and bowed formally to Kenji. "I would be happy to learn," she said simply. As she moved to the center of the training area, something subtle shifted in her posture and movement. The change was so slight that most observers missed it entirely, but Master Chen noticed immediately. Sarah's stance became more grounded, her balance more perfect, and her eyes took on a focus that suggested complete awareness of her surroundings. Kenji approached with casual confidence, clearly planning to demonstrate a few basic techniques while barely exerting himself. His intention was to show Sarah how easily a trained fighter could control an untrained opponent, providing both education and entertainment for the watching students. "We will start with something simple," Kenji announced to the group. "A basic wrist grab escape that you have probably practiced in class." He reached forward to grasp Sarah's wrist, moving slowly enough that she could see the technique coming and attempt whatever defense she had learned. His grip, when it closed around her wrist, was firm but not painful. For just a moment, nothing happened. Sarah stood still, apparently considering her options while Kenji maintained his hold with relaxed confidence. Then Sarah moved. What happened next was so fast and fluid that most observers saw only the result, not the technique itself. Kenji found himself airborne, spinning through space before impacting the training mat with considerable force. The throw was executed with such perfect timing and leverage that he had no opportunity to break his fall or counter the technique. The dojo fell completely silent as Kenji lay on the mat, stunned by both the physical impact and the impossibility of what had just occurred. Sarah stood in perfect balance above him, her expression unchanged, as if throwing a skilled black belt across the room was something she did every day. Master Tanaka stared in shock, his confidence shaken for the first time that evening. His other students looked equally bewildered, unable to process how their skilled teammate had been defeated so easily by someone they had dismissed as a harmless beginner. Sarah extended her hand to help Kenji to his feet, her demeanor as humble and polite as ever. "Are you hurt?" she asked with genuine. Sarah helped Kenji to his feet with the same quiet courtesy she had shown since joining the dojo. "You moved exactly as I expected you would," she said simply. "The technique worked, because you committed your weight forward when you grabbed my wrist." The explanation was technically accurate but revealed nothing about the years of training required to execute such a perfect throw. Kenji dusted off his uniform, his pride stinging more than his body, though he had hit the mat hard enough to feel the impact for days. Master Tanaka stepped forward, his earlier smugness replaced by sharp attention. "That was very impressive," he said, studying Sarah with new eyes. "Perhaps you would honor us with another demonstration?" Before Sarah could respond, Marcus spoke up from the sideline. "Sarah, you don't have to do anything else. You've already shown more skill than any of us expected." But Master Tanaka was not finished. His student had been embarrassed, and his school's reputation was now in question. A white belt from this dojo had just thrown one of his black belts with authority that suggested extensive training. Either this woman was lying about her experience, or Master Chen's teaching methods were far more effective than he had given them credit for. Kenji was perhaps not fully prepared for the encounter, Master Tanaka said smoothly. Maybe a more experienced student would provide a better test. He gestured toward another of his students, a woman named Yuki, who was known for her aggressive grappling style and had won several regional competitions. Where Kenji had approached the demonstration with casual confidence, Yuki moved forward with the focused intensity of someone who took every challenge seriously. Sarah looked around the room, noting the tension that had settled over both groups of students. The visiting school's confidence had been shaken, while her own classmates watched with a mixture of amazement and concern. Master Chen's expression was unreadable, but she could see that he was analyzing every detail of her movement and technique. "If you think it would be helpful," Sarah said finally, bowing toward Yuki with the same respectful demeanor she had shown everyone else. Yuki returned the bow, but with noticeably less ceremony than Kenji had used. She was here to restore her school's reputation and had no intention of underestimating her opponent again. As she settled into her fighting stance, her posture radiated the confidence of someone who had faced real opposition in competitive settings. "This time we will use more realistic pressure," Yuki announced. "In real situations, attackers do not move slowly or give warnings about their intentions." Without further preamble, Yuki launched herself forward in a combination attack that would have overwhelmed most opponents. Her initial strike was a feint designed to set up a grappling technique, and she followed it immediately with an attempt to secure a controlling hold that would allow her to demonstrate her ground fighting expertise. Sarah's response was equally immediate and far more economical. She deflected Yuki's initial attack with minimal movement, stepped offline to avoid the grappling attempt, and countered with a technique that sent Yuki sprawling across the mat in an even more dramatic fashion than her predecessor. This time, however, the observers could see more clearly what had happened. Sarah had used Yuki's aggressive momentum against her, redirecting the attack with perfect timing while applying leverage that made resistance impossible. The counter technique was executed with such precision that it appeared effortless, though anyone with advanced training could recognize the years of practice required to achieve such fluidity. Yuki rolled to her feet quickly, her competitive instincts overriding any embarrassment. Again, she said firmly, settling back into her fighting stance. What followed was a brief but intense exchange that left no doubt about Sarah's capabilities. Yuki attacked with increasing desperation, using every technique in her considerable arsenal. But Sarah neutralized each attempt with devastating efficiency. She never appeared hurried or stressed, moving with the calm precision of someone operating well within her comfort zone. The final exchange ended with Yuki on the ground again, this time held in a controlling position that demonstrated Sarah's complete mastery of the situation. When Sarah released the hold and helped her opponent to her feet, Yuki's expression showed the grudging respect of one skilled fighter for another. "You are not a beginner," Yuki said quietly, stating what had become obvious to everyone watching. Sarah adjusted her white belt with the same calm movements she had used throughout the encounters. "I am a beginner in this dojo learning this style of karate," she replied. The answer was technically truthful, while revealing nothing about her actual background. Master Tanaka approached with a completely different demeanor than he had displayed earlier. His arrogance had been replaced by the cautious respect that skilled martial artists showed to unknown quantities. "Your technique is exceptional," he said formally. "Would you tell us about your training background?" For a long moment, Sarah considered her response. The room was completely silent, with both groups of students waiting to hear her explanation. Marcus, Jennifer, and David stood together near one wall, their expressions showing a mixture of vindication and confusion. They had suspected Sarah possessed hidden abilities, but what they had witnessed exceeded their wildest speculation. "I studied martial arts many years ago," Sarah said finally, "but life took me in different directions and I stopped training. Recently I decided to start again." The explanation satisfied no one, least of all Master Chen, who had been analyzing every movement Sarah had made. Her techniques showed influences from multiple martial arts styles, suggesting either very broad training or instruction from teachers with diverse backgrounds. More importantly, her level of skill indicated recent practice, not abilities rusty from years of disuse. "What style did you study?" Master Tanaka pressed, unwilling to let the matter drop. Sarah smiled with the same quiet demeanor she had maintained throughout the evening. "Several different styles over the years. I found each one taught me something valuable." Master Tanaka nodded slowly, recognizing that he would get no more specific information. In the martial arts community, some people preferred to keep their backgrounds private for various reasons. Perhaps Sarah had trained in military or law enforcement contexts that she could not discuss freely. Perhaps she had personal reasons for maintaining discretion about her past. "Would you consider demonstrating some techniques for our students?" he asked. It would be educational to see applications from different stylistic backgrounds. Before Sarah could answer, Master Chen stepped forward. "I think we have seen enough demonstrations for one evening," he said diplomatically. "Our regular class schedule should continue." As the formal portion of the evening wound down, both groups of students began the traditional closing ceremonies. The visiting students were notably more subdued than they had been upon arrival, while the regular dojo members showed renewed confidence in their school and instructor. During the final meditation period, Sarah sat in perfect stillness while her mind processed the evening's events. She had revealed more of her capabilities than she had intended, but the situation had demanded action to preserve the dignity of her dojo and her instructor. Master Chen had shown her respect and patience, and she would not stand by while others mocked his teaching methods. As students began to change out of their uniforms, the visiting group prepared for their departure with considerably less fanfare than their arrival. Master Tanaka approached Master Chen for a private conversation, speaking quietly about training methodologies and student development. The tone of their discussion was markedly more respectful than it had been earlier in the evening. Marcus, Jennifer, and David surrounded Sarah as she packed her equipment, their earlier dismissiveness completely forgotten. "That was incredible," Jennifer said with genuine admiration. "I've never seen technique like that outside of advanced tournament competition." "Where did you learn to fight like that?" David asked directly. "And please don't tell us you picked it up from a few self-defense classes." Sarah shouldered her gym bag and looked at the three black belts who had initially viewed her as nothing more than another middle-aged mom playing at martial arts. Their respect was evident now, but she could also see the curiosity that would not easily be satisfied with vague explanations. "I learned from good teachers," she said simply. "And I practiced regularly for many years." Marcus shook his head in amazement. "You made it look effortless. Those throws were textbook perfect, but you adapted them instantly to counter techniques I've never seen before." "Experience teaches adaptation," Sarah replied. "Every opponent presents different challenges." As they walked toward the exit together, Jennifer voiced the question that all three were thinking. "Why didn't you tell us about your background when we first met?" "We must have seemed incredibly arrogant, giving advice to someone with your level of skill." Sarah paused at the door, considering her answer. "You weren't wrong to offer guidance to a new student," she said finally. "And I am learning new things in every class, regardless of what I might have known before." The humility in her response only increased their respect, but it also deepened the mystery surrounding her background. As they parted ways in the parking lot, Marcus, Jennifer, and David found themselves with more questions than answers. The following days brought a noticeable change to the atmosphere at the dojo. Word of Sarah's demonstrations had spread through the local martial arts community, creating curiosity about the mysterious white belt, who could defeat experienced black belts with apparent ease. Students from other schools began visiting during regular class times, hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman who had humbled the aggressive Dragon-style academy. Sarah continued attending classes with her usual punctuality and quiet demeanor, but she could feel the weight of attention from both familiar and unfamiliar faces. Other students watched her movements more carefully now, analyzing every technique she practiced for signs of the advanced skills she had displayed. The casual conversations that had developed with her classmates became more tentative, as if people were uncertain how to interact with someone whose abilities they had so completely misjudged. Master Chen observed these changes with growing concern. The dojo had always maintained a peaceful atmosphere focused on learning and personal development. The sudden influx of curious visitors and the changed dynamic among regular students threatened to disrupt the environment he had worked years to create. During a quiet moment after Thursday evening's class, Master Chen approached Sarah as she prepared to leave. "Walk with me for a moment," he said, gesturing toward a small garden area behind the community center where they could speak privately. The evening air was cool and peaceful, a stark contrast to the charged atmosphere inside the dojo. Master Chen was quiet for several minutes, clearly organizing his thoughts before speaking. Sarah waited patiently, having learned over the years that rushed conversations rarely led to meaningful understanding. "In 30 years of teaching," Master Chen began finally, "I have met perhaps a dozen students with natural ability that set them apart from others. You possess not just natural ability, but refined skill that comes only from extensive training under exceptional instruction." Sarah nodded but said nothing, sensing that he had more to say. "Your presence here creates a dilemma," he continued. "Students come to learn, but they also come for community and mutual respect. When someone with your capabilities wears a white belt, it disrupts the traditional structure that helps maintain order and proper relationships between students." The concern in his voice was genuine, and Sarah understood his position perfectly. Martial arts schools relied on clear hierarchies and understood expectations. Her situation challenged both in ways that could undermine the learning environment for everyone else. "I never intended to cause problems," Sarah said quietly. "I came here to learn your style of karate and to be part of a community. If my presence is disruptive, I can find somewhere else to train." Master Chen shook his head immediately. "That is not what I am suggesting. You have every right to train here, and I believe you have much to contribute to our school. But we need to find a way to address the situation honestly, while maintaining the respect and discipline that are essential to proper training." He paused, studying Sarah's face in the dim light from the building's windows. "I would like to know more about your background, not from curiosity, but to understand how best to integrate your experience into our community." For a long moment, Sarah considered how much she was willing to reveal. She had spent years learning to keep certain aspects of her life separate and private. But Master Chen had earned her respect through his teaching methods and his treatment of all students, regardless of their skill level or background. "I began training when I was 12 years old," she said finally. "My father was military, and we lived in various places where I had access to different instructors and styles. I trained seriously through high school and college, competing in several regional tournaments. Master Chen listened without interruption, sensing that there was much more to the story. After college, I continued training while working in security and personal protection services. The work required maintaining and developing practical skills, not just traditional techniques. I learned to adapt different martial arts styles to real-world situations. The explanation provided context for Sarah's unusual skill set without revealing specific details. About her professional background, Master Chen nodded thoughtfully, understanding now why her techniques showed such a wide range of influences and why her applications were so immediately effective. "And then you stopped training?" he asked. Sarah was quiet for a moment, her expression becoming more distant. "Life changed. I got married, had children, took a different kind of job. The time and energy required for serious training weren't available anymore. I maintained basic conditioning, but I stopped practicing martial arts techniques regularly about 15 years ago." 15 years, Master Chen repeated thoughtfully. "Yet your skills show no signs of deterioration from lack of practice." Sarah smiled slightly. "Some things become part of you in ways that don't easily fade. And I may have been more active in recent years than I initially suggested." The admission was carefully worded but acknowledged what Master Chen had already suspected. Sarah's techniques were too sharp and her timing too perfect for someone who had been completely inactive for a decade and a half. "Recent circumstances required me to resume training," she continued. "Nothing formal, just enough to maintain certain capabilities. When I decided to join your dojo, I was genuinely interested in learning traditional karate as it should be taught, not just using martial arts as a tool for other purposes." Master Chen understood. Many people with military or law enforcement backgrounds found traditional martial arts training refreshing after years of focusing purely on tactical applications. The philosophical aspects and community environment offered something that purely practical training could not provide. "Would you be willing to share some of your experience with other students?" he asked. "Not as an instructor, but as someone with practical knowledge that could benefit their understanding." Sarah considered the proposal carefully. Teaching or demonstrating would require revealing more about her capabilities, but it might also help normalize her presence in the dojo. If other students understood that she was there to contribute as well as learn, some of the awkwardness might dissipate. "I would be honored to help however you think would be appropriate," she said finally. Over the following weeks, Master Chen gradually incorporated Sarah into the teaching structure of the dojo. She remained a white belt student in formal rankings, but during certain classes she would demonstrate applications or explain principles from her varied background. The arrangement satisfied the curiosity of other students while providing valuable learning opportunities. Marcus, Jennifer, and David became frequent training partners, eager to understand the techniques and principles that made Sarah's application so effective. Their initial embarrassment at being defeated by a supposed beginner evolved into genuine appreciation for the opportunity to learn from someone with such diverse experience. "Your footwork is completely different from what we've been taught," Jennifer observed during one training session. "It's more fluid, like you're always ready to move in any direction." Sarah demonstrated the principle slowly, showing how slight adjustments in stance and weight distribution could provide multiple options for response. "Different situations require different approaches," she explained. "Tournament fighting is different from street encounters, which are different from classroom practice. Each has its place, but the transitions between them need to be seamless." David, who had always prided himself on his technical precision, found Sarah's emphasis on adaptability challenging but educational. "I've always focused on perfecting specific techniques," he said, "but you seem to modify everything based on what your opponent does." "Techniques are tools," Sarah replied. "The same hammer can drive nails, remove them, or break things apart, depending on how you use it and what the situation requires. Martial arts techniques should be equally versatile." The insights she shared came from years of experience in situations where adaptation meant the difference between success and failure. Her explanations were practical and grounded in reality, providing context that enhanced the traditional instruction the students received from Master Chen. As word spread about the unique learning opportunities available at Master Chen's dojo, enrollment began to increase. Students from other schools requested permission to attend seminars or special training sessions where Sarah shared her knowledge. The dojo's reputation grew, but in a way that enhanced rather than threatened the traditional values Master Chen worked to maintain. However, not everyone in the martial arts community was pleased with these developments. The Dragon Style Academy, still smarting from their students' defeats, began spreading rumors about Sarah's background and qualifications. Master Tanaka suggested publicly that she was misrepresenting her credentials and that her techniques were too aggressive for traditional karate training. The criticism came to a head when Master Tanaka formally challenged Master Chen to a demonstration bout between their school's best students. The proposal was couched in terms of friendly competition and cultural exchange, but everyone understood it as an attempt to restore the Dragon Style Academy's damaged reputation. "They want to face you directly," Master Chen told Sarah after receiving the formal challenge from Dragon Style Academy arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by one of Master Tanaka's senior students with great ceremony. The document was written in traditional format, with elaborate language that barely concealed the aggressive intentions behind the polite words. Master Chen read it carefully while Sarah and several other students watched from nearby. They propose a demonstration of comparative techniques and applications, Master Chen summarized after finishing the document. 5 matches between students of similar rank, with the final bout between representatives chosen by each school. Sarah understood immediately that she would be expected to participate in the final match. Master Tanaka's challenge was specifically designed to force her into a public demonstration where her true capabilities would be revealed to the entire local martial arts community. "You don't have to accept," Marcus said firmly. "This is clearly a setup to embarrass you or our school." Master Tanaka is still angry about what happened during their visit. Jennifer nodded in agreement. They're trying to turn this into some kind of tournament rather than a learning exchange. That's not what martial arts should be about. But Sarah was already considering the implications of refusing the challenge. Master Tanaka would undoubtedly interpret any decline as admission that her previous performances had been lucky accidents rather than displays of genuine skill. The rumors and speculation that were already circulating through the martial arts community would intensify, potentially damaging Master Chen's reputation and the dojo's standing. "I'll participate," Sarah said quietly, "but I want everyone to understand that this may require me to reveal more about my background than I've been comfortable sharing." Master Chen studied her expression carefully. "Are you certain? Once this knowledge becomes public, there will be no returning to anonymity." Sarah had been wrestling with this decision since the night she first demonstrated her abilities. Part of her had hoped she could continue training quietly, learning traditional karate while keeping her past private, but circumstances had made that impossible. "Some things are more important than personal privacy," she said finally. "This dojo has become important to me, and I won't let others attack its reputation because of my presence here." The demonstration was scheduled for the following Saturday at a neutral location, a large gymnasium that hosted martial arts events throughout the year. Word spread quickly through the community, and it became clear that this would be a well-attended event. Many instructors and advanced students from various schools planned to observe, drawn by curiosity about the mysterious woman who had caused such controversy. During the week leading up to the demonstration, Sarah's training intensified significantly. She began arriving early and staying late, working on combinations and applications with a focus that surprised even Master Chen. Her movements during these private sessions revealed levels of skill that exceeded what she had shown in regular classes. Marcus, Jennifer, and David served as training partners during these preparation sessions, and they began to understand just how much Sarah had been holding back during regular classes. Her speed, power, and technical precision were far beyond what they had imagined, even after witnessing her earlier demonstrations. "This is incredible," David said after a particularly intense sparring session. "You've been training with us for months, but you were never really trying, were you?" Sarah toweled off sweat and considered her response. "I was learning," she said finally. "But no, I wasn't operating at full capacity. That wouldn't have been appropriate for the training environment here." "What's your actual background?" Jennifer asked directly. "And please don't give us another vague answer about studying different styles. We've been training partners for months now. We deserve to know who we're really working with." For a long moment, Sarah looked at the 3 people who had become not just training partners but genuine friends. They had earned the right to know more about her history, especially given their support and the risks they were taking by helping her prepare for the upcoming demonstration. I spent 12 years in military special operations, she said finally. Combat training was a significant part of my responsibilities, and martial arts were integrated into tactical applications. After leaving the military, I worked in personal security and threat assessment for clients who faced serious physical risks. The revelation explained much about her unusual skill set and her ability to adapt techniques instantly to changing situations. Military combatives training emphasized effectiveness over traditional form, while personal protection work required constant awareness and split-second decision-making abilities. That's why your techniques are so different, Marcus said with sudden understanding. You learned martial arts as tools for survival rather than sport or personal development. Sarah nodded. The philosophical aspects were always secondary to practical applications. Coming here has reminded me how much I missed the traditional elements of training. There's value in both approaches. Why did you stop? Jennifer asked. If you were that good at it, why give it up? Sarah's expression became more distant, suggesting memories she preferred not to revisit. Personal circumstances changed. I had family responsibilities that required a different kind of life. The work I was doing involved risks that I was no longer willing to accept. The explanation was carefully neutral, but her tone suggested experiences that had been difficult or traumatic. Her training partners didn't press for more details, recognizing that some aspects of her background were too personal to share casually. Saturday morning arrived with unseasonably warm weather and clear skies. The gymnasium filled early with spectators from throughout the region, including several martial arts instructors who had heard conflicting stories about Sarah's capabilities and wanted to see the truth for themselves. Master Tanaka arrived with his students in matching team uniforms, their presentation polished and professional in a way that emphasized their competitive focus. They moved through warm-up exercises with military precision, clearly intending to intimidate their opponents and impress the watching crowd. Sarah arrived wearing her simple white uniform and white belt, looking exactly like what she claimed to be, a beginning student who had been training for less than a year. The contrast with her opponent's elaborate preparations was striking and intentional. The early matches proceeded according to expectations, with skilled students from both schools demonstrating high-level techniques and applications. The Dragon-style Academy students fought aggressively and effectively, winning 3 of the 4 preliminary bouts through superior conditioning and tactical preparation. Master Chen's students performed respectably but were clearly outmatched by opponents who had trained specifically for competitive situations. The crowd's sympathy began shifting toward the underdog school, particularly when it became obvious that the visiting students were using considerably more force than necessary for a friendly demonstration. By the time the final match was announced, tension in the gymnasium was palpable. Sarah walked to the center of the training area with the same calm demeanor she had maintained throughout the morning, while her opponent, one of Master Tanaka's senior students named Hiroshi, approached with visible confidence. Hiroshi was an imposing figure, several inches taller than Sarah and significantly more muscular. His uniform showed the wear patterns of years of intense training, and his movements radiated the kind of controlled aggression that intimidated most opponents before any physical contact began. As the 2 competitors faced each other for the traditional opening ceremony, the gymnasium fell completely silent. This was the moment everyone had come to see. The mysterious white belt against a proven champion from one of the region's most respected competitive schools. The formal bow was executed with perfect technique by both participants, but Sarah could see in Hiroshi's eyes that he intended to end the match quickly and decisively. His school's reputation demanded a convincing victory that would dispel any lingering questions about her earlier performances. When the match began, Hiroshi attacked immediately with a combination that would have overwhelmed most opponents. His techniques were precisely executed and delivered with significant power, designed to test Sarah's defensive capabilities while establishing his dominance of the encounter. Sarah's response was devastating in its simplicity. She moved minimally, deflecting his attacks with economical precision while positioning herself for counters that never materialized. Instead of engaging in the aggressive exchange Hiroshi expected, she allowed his momentum to work against him while maintaining perfect balance and control. The pattern continued for several exchanges, with Hiroshi becoming increasingly frustrated by his inability to land meaningful techniques against an opponent who seemed to anticipate his every move. His attacks grew more desperate and less controlled, while Sarah remained centered and calm. The end came suddenly and with finality that left no doubt about the outcome. Hiroshi committed fully to a powerful combination that should have been impossible to counter. But Sarah stepped inside his defense and executed a throw that sent him across the training area with authority that demonstrated complete mastery of the situation. As Hiroshi SE,